Hello, and welcome to the Lux Research webinar on Augment Your Business with AR. My name is Kort Eisenhagen, and I lead Lux Research's international business units across Europe, Middle East, Africa, and the Asia Pacific regions. Our speaker today is Tracy Wu, an analyst based out of our Boston office. Tracy leads the electronic user interface research at Lux, where she regularly advises our clients on issues related to innovation, strategy, investments and partnerships, and product development in the rapidly growing electronic user interfaces domain. If during the course of Tracy's presentation you have any questions for her or about Lux Research, please type them into the Q&A box on the GoToMeeting platform, and at the end of the webinar, we'll get to as many of your questions as possible. So before we get started, a few words about the challenges we are seeing in the electronics and IT industries today, and how Lux Research helps companies like yours drive innovation and growth through these emerging technologies. Overall, we're seeing a number of challenges in this space. Number one, market share and profit margin are at risk due to quickly changing digital landscapes and ecosystems. We see new market entrants coming onto the scene every day with new, potentially disruptive products and services. Secondly, rapid development and proliferation of new device pressures suppliers to stay ahead of trends, to design products that meet tomorrow's demands. Now, these technical specs coming from these new products are seeing rapid step change improvements, and suppliers need to stay apace of these changes to keep their products competitive. And third, traditional markets and operations are becoming more and more digitized, but each comes with unique challenges and value propositions. Certainly, a big market driver is the continued push of Industry 4.0 and digital transformation initiatives across all industries, driving adoption of these technologies forward. So how do you find and foster new growth? Well, certainly it is not easy, it's quite complicated. If you're the head of innovation, the head of strategy, the head of product development, or corporate venture capital, many questions must be answered quickly so that you can define your strategic direction. You must understand the market landscape and its key players. You need an in-depth understanding of the technical specs of some of these new, very early stage technologies. And you must clearly identify the opportunities and the risks associated with them. And that's really where Lux Research analysis comes in. Companies today need to supercharge their growth strategies with the right data and insights to get at the what, who, and when of technology innovation. And Lux provides that expert curation of data developed from our advanced analytics platform, plus domain knowledge from our technology experts to identify the key market trends and indicators, really what you should do about them going forward. We're the leading provider of tech-enabled research and advisory solutions, helping our clients drive growth through technology innovation. So as a demonstration of our approach, I'd like to now pass things off to Tracy, who will take us through a brief analysis on AR adoption and the opportunities for all of you in this space. Certainly, if you have questions about Lux Research or what we do, please ask them in the Q&A box or follow up with us directly. And Tracy, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Kort. Hi, I'm Tracy Wu. I lead the electronic user interfaces practice, which is a coverage area that's under the digital transformation umbrella. And in the digital transformation pod, we focus on 4 key themes. 1, where and how to grow your product portfolio. 2, where and how to implement agile and efficient processes. 3, showing what is the best way to take advantage or monetize the different trends of digital. And 4, pointing out when digital is transforming your industry and where. So in today's webinar, we will be focusing on the theme of agile and efficient processes. And more specifically, we will be talking about how your company can benefit and improve with AR. AR as a technology has long existed, but it's only been recently that it's been lauded as this breakthrough and transformative technology. This hype is underscored by mainstream media coverage of large companies making big moves in AR. And the most recent news was with Microsoft, Apple, Amazon. They have been either expanding their portfolio or trying to enter the value chain for AR. And on the other side, Ford using AR to help design better vehicles. Now, this is beyond just mainstream media hype. There's actual data to support this rise in activity. Since 1997, there have been over 18,000 patents in AR that have been granted and applied for. But it's only been in the past 5 years that we've seen 15,000 of those 18,000 patents. So to put that in context, that's an annual growth rate of 30%. But it's not just large companies working on AR, it's also a bunch of smaller companies and startups working on this space. So since 2000, there have been $6.4 billion in funding that's been raised for AR. However, the lion's share was raised just within the past 5 years, and to put that in context, that's an annual growth rate of 62%. So clearly there's tremendous growth and activity in AR, and that's what I want to talk to you today about. I want to succinctly define AR and why you and your company should care about it. I want to walk through the decision framework that's developed at Lux in terms of how to implement AR, because it's not an easy process. And then last, I want to explore a real-world implementation of AR and compare it against our decision-making framework. There's a lot of debate over what the definition of AR should be. Some argue that it should be digital imagery that's just overlaid in front of the user. So in other words, if you put on a pair of smart glasses and you pan your head from left to right, that the digital imagery will follow you. Others argue that the definition of AR should be that it is digital imagery that is tied to the real world or to places in the real world. So in other words, if you put on that same pair of smart glasses and you pan your head left to right, that digital imagery will stay connected to those objects. At Lux, we choose to include both of those definitions, and we choose to see it as that for AR having to do with head-up displays, head-mounted displays, tablets, that AR is simply technology that superimposes a computer-generated image on the real world. Most of us know AR from gaming, but I want to emphasize that this is more than just finding Pikachu. That we've seen AR in automotive where there are many pilot cases, but that industry as a whole is in its nascent stages due to difficulties in technology implementation. We've also seen retailers such as La Casa, American Apparel, and Timberland enable customers to either use an app or an in-store display to virtually try on clothes. And in the enterprise, we've seen tangible ROI, and that's where we'll be spending the bulk of our conversation today. We've seen results such as this: a 50% error reduction in wire harness assembly, a 50% reduction in non-productive time for an oil and gas refinery, and an 80% inspection time decrease for inspecting brackets in an airplane fuselage. Now, these are just a few of the many, many examples that we've seen where we've gone over many case studies where the value of AR is proven over and over again. So the value that AR has in the enterprise is obvious, but the implementation is less so. And there are lots of paths and options to implementing and using AR, but building and implementing AR is not easy. So that leads us to the crux of the question today, which is, how do I choose the right AR solution? Because choosing a solution is convoluted and difficult if that's not obvious to you yet. And implementing AR has very high rewards, but the cost of doing it wrong has even greater consequences. And that's what we want to talk about today. And what I want to walk you through is the Lux Decision-Making Framework of how do you implement AR. So this is just an overview of our decision-making framework, which starts out with the question of, should you even implement AR? Because there will be many scenarios where AR is the technology that you should be using, but there'll be some scenarios where AR isn't the best technology to use, and in those cases, you'll want to choose a different technology. And second, we'll go through the different sorts of hardware considerations you should consider when choosing a device, and then second, the software considerations in terms of what sort of solution and path you should go through. So we've determined that AR as a whole needs two criteria. And if you're trying to figure out, should you be implementing AR, there are two questions you should be asking. One is the procedure complex? And does it require human operation? A complex procedure would be anything such as fixing a very intricate motorized mechanism or putting together a very complicated, intricate, heavy piece of machinery or assembly. And does it require human operation is anything where the human must be central to the task. In other words, you can't replace it easily with an automated solution or robotics. So once you've determined that your situation is complex and requires human operation, then you need to consider if the problem can be solved with AR. There are two tasks that AR works well specifically in. One is, does it help you to communicate visually or better? So in other words, are you trying to show someone that's remotely connected somewhere else what you're seeing? Or would more data placed in front of the user help them to see or understand a situation better? If AR fits your needs, then it's time to choose the right solution. And in that scenario, that leads us back to the same initial confusion, which is there are a ton of hardware options. There are head-mounted displays, head-up displays, tablets, smart glasses, and an even wider myriad of software solutions. There's software development kits for do-it-yourself solution. There are industry-specific off-the-shelf solutions. And if your head is spinning, it should be, because I'll be honest, this is not easy. So what I'd like to walk you through is our decision-making framework. And the first step is choosing and picking a hardware solution. Now, hardware solutions are evaluated against 4 different criteria. The first one being digital overlay. So consider your viewing angle. Are you looking at a whole system, or are you looking at a very detailed component? And with ambient lighting, are you moving indoors or outdoors? If you're moving outdoors, then the brightness of your display will need to be much brighter than it is inside. Second, consider your contextual awareness. Does the digital object need to be aware of where it is in the real world, or does it need to be aware of where it's located? Next is computation platform, which is just understanding the actual capabilities of the computer itself. So how long does the battery life need to be? Can you charge it after an hour, or is this something that you can wait and charge 8 hours later? Do you need connectivity requirements, such as do you need to connect to someone that's remotely located, or do you need to be uploading or showing video of what you're seeing? And last, do you need to capture any image or video for any future documentation or for training purposes? The last one is form factor, which is determining how comfortable do you need the device to be. If you're wearing the device for 8 hours a day, it will need to be pretty comfortable. If you are working with a system where you need both of your hands free, do you need to work with a device where you can actually just wear it on your head? And does your device need to protect you? Or are you working in a situation that's potentially dangerous or explosive? So once you've determined this 4 key criteria, then you'll need to pick your software solution. And software is determined against 2 basic criteria. The first is build versus buy. And I want to reiterate here, or I want to iterate here, that you have that same option with hardware solutions. You can choose to build, but in every scenario, we would recommend that you buy, because building and implementing a winning AR hardware device is very difficult. But in software, the choices are less so. And what you should consider is the level of requirements. How customized does your solution need to be? If it's very customized, you may want to think about using buying a custom solution, and also consider your resources available. So, do you have a bunch of cash that you can throw at a solution and pay someone to do? Do you have internal expertise where you can have someone that's coding or helping you to do that? Or is that something that you'll need to outsource? And second is consider the path you need to take. Do you need to go marker-based or location-based? With marker-based, you have the device, which is scanning either a QR code or recognizing an object and then pulling up the information in front of you, versus location-based, which is based on GPS data, and the device will show the imagery based on where it's pointing. So for those sort of scenarios, you need to consider, do you need to know more information about an object? So in order to learn about an object or to fix an object, or do you need to know more information about a location? In other words, if you're walking down a street and you need to know where are the best deals, where are the top restaurants in this area, you can easily pan your phone to see those images. So we walked you through the implementation framework. And now what I want to talk to you about is exploring a real-life, real-world implementation where AR is being used. And I want to compare it against our decision-making framework to see how they actually did. MidAmerican Energy is a company that serves 750,000 natural gas customers in Iowa, Illinois, South Dakota, and Nebraska. The company wanted to implement AR for these reasons. They had slow onboarding that led to poor services. So originally they were using these traditional methods of just paper manuals, and they needed a way to more quickly train their newer technicians on company procedures. They felt that their worker safety was at risk because their technicians, what they were doing was walking up to gas meters, inspecting them, making sure that they were operating correctly, and if they weren't, then knowing how to fix it. And that's potentially dangerous and explosive situation. So they wanted to be able to help to improve that training. And last, there were many technicians, but there's only a few that are very experienced. And they wanted to create a more cohesive knowledge base to pass down that knowledge to less experienced technicians. So let's walk through the decision-making framework. The first question is the procedure complex? And does it require human operation? Well, in this scenario, you are training a human to walk up to a gas meter, potentially fix it, or make sure that it's okay. So in that scenario, with it being a potentially dangerous and explosive situation, I would say, yes, the procedure is complex. And the second is, does it require human operation? Well, in this scenario, you are training a human, so I'd say yes, it would be central to the task. Now consider if the task can be solved with one of these two tasks, which is, do you need to communicate better, or would more data help them to see better or understand the situation better? Well, in this scenario, the technician is walking up to a gas meter, recognizing the gas meter, and information is being overlaid in front of them. So in that scenario, it would help them to see better. Now let's consider what they would do for a hardware solution, knowing that the problem is right for AR. And there are 4 criteria to choose, and what I want to emphasize here is that you have 4 criteria, but you can't weight them all equally. Even with the most expensive, most fully equipped solutions, you're going to have to choose 1 or 2 to prioritize. And in this scenario, MidAmerican prioritized the computation platform. And what they chose was an Android or iOS tablet or smartphone. And they chose it for a number of reasons. So the long battery life, the fact that there are easy connectivity capabilities, but then also for a number of other reasons, such as its ubiquitous nature. So most people have an Android iOS tablet or smartphone, and so they wouldn't have to put down a huge amount of cash to buy smart glasses or headsets that could be easily damaged. So that meant a lower cost to entry in terms of implementing an AR solution. So now that they've chosen their hardware, let's look at what their software choices were. And what they chose to do for their build versus buy was they chose to buy a custom software solution created by Index AR. They recognized their lack of expertise and limited resources in developing software. They're not a software company, so they chose Index AR solutions to build that solution for them. And what they built was a marker-based app, and this was a very creatively named app called Super App, since it was Mid-American's task to be able to train an individual. And so what this application looks like is an individual approaches a gas meter, the app recognizes the gas meter, provides digital information to inform the technician on what to do. And what they do is that there is an interactive multimedia ebook. It's paired with the app. It reenacts real-world scenarios and hardware. And this can be used for training specifically, but also in the field because it includes other digital information such as 3D models, AR overlays, animations, and step-by-step navigation. So what I want to emphasize here is through a tablet and a simple application, what they were able to find in terms of their ROI was a 2 to 4 times increase in worker productivity. And just through this simple solution, they were able to accelerate training, increase knowledge cohesion, and that was able to create this sort of tangible ROI. So the key takeaways today is, 1, if your situation suits AR, then you need to be using AR today. And if you're not, you're behind the curve. If you're an end user for AR, know that AR will improve and that it will improve quickly. So you'll need to keep your finger on the pulse of AR and where it's developing. And that's where I can help and step in to help inform you of that if you become a client. And last, if you're a developer, there are a few key areas to focus on. Specifically, I would say focus on winning in hardware because there isn't a winning hardware product right now, and there are many, many areas to improve upon, but the areas I would say to focus on to try to win are in optics, in terms of waveguide or what sort of solution you should be using there, processor, whether it should be a faster processor, should be edge processing, or form factor. So having a lighter, more comfortable form factor if you're doing something that's head mounted. So that's all I have for today. Thank you again for joining me, and I want to open it up to questions right now.
Thank you very much, Tracy. That was an incredibly informative presentation. As a reminder to our attendees today, if you do have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box on your GoToMeeting webinar platform, and we'll answer as many as we can with the limited time we have left. I do see a couple of questions coming in, Tracy, so let's take a few of those now. The first question says, you mentioned Ford is using AR for design and collaboration. Can you elaborate on what that looks like?
So what Ford did is they announced last spring that they were going to be using the Microsoft HoloLens to help design their vehicles better. And how that looks like is that they have a number of design teams that are located all around the world that are working on the same vehicle designs. So one, they wanted a way to be able to interact with each other, I think beyond just over the phone or beyond just video chat. what they wanted to do was to have the HoloLens, have everyone sit in a virtual room and be able to see the same 3D design in front of them. And so that was one scenario. The other scenario is because they had design teams that were located in different parts of the globe, they were not working on designs at the same time. And they wanted to be able to provide commentary and to, I guess, pass on messages to each other in a way that would be easier to understand and digest. So one of the things that they were able to do is, okay, so if you have a 3D model and you wanted to be able to say, I'd like to move this mirror up a little bit higher, you would be able to provide voice annotation and context to that model. So there would be a little image that would show up and say, there's a note about this part of the 3D model, this virtual 3D model. And the next person that comes up would be able to click on that note and to be able to hear that comment, I'd like to move this mirror up a little bit higher.
Great, thank you very much. We have another question coming in. You didn't mention much about healthcare. Do you see an uptake of adoption in this particular segment?
So there are a lot of use cases for AR and actually VR for the medical space. And I would say that VR is actually very well suited for the medical area. And I know that we didn't spend a lot of time we didn't spend any time talking about it today. But that's actually very well suited for this space because VR is good for simulation and for training. So there's actually a number of companies that I've spoken to about in this space, one of them being a surgical training solution that you can use it to be able to, reenact different sorts of procedures to be able to learn and train for these sort of surgical procedures. So that's one company that I've spoke with. There are a number of other companies that are working in the AR space that are using it also for surgical use in the operating room. So it's either for when they're actually operating on the patient and they are able to have the images, medical images projected in front of them, or they're using it for interventional procedures, so for non-invasive procedures where they have the images of the patient being used out in front of them. And then there are also some smaller companies, like there's a company called Accuvane, where they have a device where you can actually scan the patient's arm to be able to know where the veins are, to be able to properly draw blood from them without pricking them everywhere.
Thank you very much. We have got one more, a bit of a technical question. The question is, there are a lot of solutions that use a marker-based approach. How do you choose between the different choices once you've decided that you're going to buy a solution?
So for those sort of scenarios, there are a number of companies that we've chosen that work that way. Like, I'd say one of the best companies that we spoke with, just a few months ago was PTC Vuforia. Their biggest differentiation is the ability to align the digital object as closely as possible to the real world. So imagine, you might think that that's not that important if you're just putting a set of work instructions in front of the worker. But if you're trying to say, see, how does a piece of furniture fit in my room? Then you don't want it to just float in front of you. You want it to actually fit in your room, even if it's just a virtual model. So they're one company that's great. They have what they do is you scan a QR code and then you'll be able to project the images that way. But what I want to emphasize here is that they create there's a software development kit, and so you would need some level of expertise to be able to build their solution. There's other types of solutions from companies that we've spoken with that are also highly differentiated. There's another company called Zachary. They use a computer vision-based approach, and they're a software company, and we spoke with them a few months ago. and they're actually a company that was built based on their computer vision technology, and then started to go into the hardware space when they realized that there were no hardware devices that were available to them. So in those sort of scenarios, I would say I would choose something like PTC V4 is if you have in-house expertise. I would choose something like Daiquiri if you wanted something that was easier to work with, or something that actually had, I don't know, a kit that would enable a non-technical person to be able to build an AR experience.
Great, thank you, Tracy. I think we've got time for one last question, kind of a summary question here. You mentioned gaming, auto, retail as potential areas of AR adoption. In your opinion, what industry or application represents the largest near-term opportunity?
So obviously, I think the first entry of AR was in the AR space, but really where we're seeing growth and adoption is within the automotive space. The retail space, we've been seeing some adoption, and this is really for like consumer experience and immersion, and the ROI of it is not quite clear yet. With automotive, though, it removes a lot of the barriers that you'd see in the consumer space in terms of the social stigma of walking around with glasses and a camera on your head, or walking around with a bulky headset. In the automotive space, all of those technologies are folded into the vehicle. And the second part of it is, so you don't have to worry about the form factor. You don't have to worry about the heat diffusion aspects. You don't have to worry about this computer that's pulsating heat on your forehead. And last, the pricing is something that is folded into the vehicle. So many would balk at the fact of, say, putting down $2,000 or even $20,000 for a headset. But if you're adding that cost to a vehicle that already costs $50,000 and now it's $52,000, the cost, or the barrier to entry for cost-wise, is much lower. So in that scenario, I would say automotive would be the next space to go into after enterprise. However, I would say that there are a number of difficulties within technology implementation, and that's something that we go into further in my research here, or in our research here at Lux.
Very good. Thanks, Tracy. We're just coming to the end of our session. Thanks again for a great presentation and taking some of those participant questions today. While we weren't able to get to all of those questions, if you did submit one or still want to, please email us directly and we'll get back to you as soon as we can with a follow-up to your question. For those of you who asked questions about receiving the presentation slides, we will be sending out the presentation material and the recording to everyone that attended today. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and check out our blog for ongoing information and analyst insights. I wish everyone have a great day ahead. Thank you for your attention. Thanks again, Tracy, for a great presentation, and have a great day. Bye-bye.